Michael Furman is the world's most sought-after studio photographer of significant automobiles. Drive Tribe found him photographing Owl 226, a faithful Jaguar low-drag coupe recreation at the Collector Car Vault in Santa Paula, California.
One question I get asked more than any other is, what was my favorite car to photograph? And I haven't figured out how many cars. It's well north of 1,000. I'm not sure if it's north of 2,000 yet. And there are a lot of significant cars, a lot of major museums, major collectors around the country, from around the world. And none of them would stand out in my mind. And then I met a gentleman at an event in Santa Fe, and he told me his story. And his story is that he took a friend's beat up, falling apart Austin Healey 100 and drove it across country. He was originally supposed to do it with his friend, but just before they started working on the car, the friend found out that he had cancer. So the friend couldn't go, but the gentleman I met said, I'm going to go cross country in your honor, just like we were going to do. And when I get to, Charleston, I'm going to turn around and come back. And when I come back, you better be alive. That's all he said. So, and they're all friends in the Austin Healey group in Southern California, which include a lot of TV guys in media, newspapers, stuff like that. And the word got out what this fella, John Nickus is his name, was going to do. So John didn't know any better, and John has raced cars and is very much into cars. And John started driving across country. He got 30 minutes out of the Huntington Pier in is that in Newport or Huntington Beach, California, and broke down. And he broke down, I don't know how many times every day. He took on hundreds of quarts of oil. He would pull into a gas station and not know if the car would start again. And the car was really held together by tape and prayers and things like that. But as John's driving across country, the word got out that he was driving in honor of his friend. So all the Healey clubs across the country would come out and meet him. So they arranged to meet him in an intersection or an off-ramp of an interstate. And they'd all be there, and John would reach in his pocket to pay for the gas. No, we got the gas. They'd fill up the gas. They would take care of the car. If he needed any parts, they'd pull parts off of their car to give to him. John's car, realistically, should not have gone more than 20 miles. I mean, that would have been an accomplishment. But he crosses the country instead. And just before he left, they named the car Grace. And all the guys who worked on the car signed the car and with best wishes to their friend, but they never put their friend's name on the car. It gets funnier later on because John starts giving rides to kids who have cancer in this car. And that's because the word got out what he was doing. And next thing you know, wherever he's going, kids from cancer wards, pediatric cancer wards, are coming to see him in his car, hoping they will get a ride in the car. And John is easy when it comes to that. He took a number of kids for a ride in the car. It gets out in the news, and as he pulls into, I guess it's Carolina, the state police meet him, and he goes, oh, what did I do now? And the state police had heard of him and gave him an escort across the state into Charleston. So everywhere he would go, he'd be interviewed and all this stuff. And John was like, I'm just driving my friend's car. Before you know it, he drives cross country, gets back to California. His friend is still alive. It took John about 10 or 11 days by himself in a car where he broke down 30 times at least. And he wound up giving a lot of kids rides. And where this story gets quite wonderful is after he gets back to California with his car, he thinks, okay, I'll go back to my life now. People found him and said, would you mind coming with your car to our children's hospital and giving kids rides? And John got way into it and spent the next 3 years doing it. He wound up driving this is hard to believe, especially if you saw Grace. And we had her in the studio. I had to beg to get her in the studio. And she drove over 300,000 miles. She gave more than 20,000 kids rides. And so with all the fabulous best of shows at Pebble Beach, with all of the Le Mans winners, with all the Indy 500 winners, with all the, the most beautiful cars in the world, the most valuable cars in the world that we've shot, Grace is the most. I have trouble getting it out because I think about the original story. And when I met John, my mother was dying of cancer. And we wrote her name big on the car. And every time I tell this story, I get all broken up.
Where's Grace now?
Grace is in a museum in Virginia, the British Car Museum in Virginia. And I was able to convince John, after 6 years, to bring the car to me in the studio. And we brought her into Philadelphia. She was on display at the Simeone Museum for about 6 months. And then we snuck her out of there one day and brought her up into the studio and photographed her. And it's my favorite car. And I tell I tell everybody, I want to live long enough to find a better car. I don't know that I will. So that's my favorite car.
Thanks, Michael.